Now, in recent weeks, the Church of Scientology has opened a National Affairs office in Dublin, from where the Church's outreach services will be looking to address issues like poverty and homelessness. Already, some councillors and Lord Mayors here have been meeting with the Church of Scientology funded drugs awareness programmes, some of them unaware of the link to the Church of Scientology. The Church is not without its critics, and the opening of a new office in Dublin has raised questions about its planned activities here in Ireland. Our reporter Brian O'Connell has been looking at all of this. Brian, just remind us about what exactly or who are the Church of Scientology?
Good morning, Sean. I suppose in many parts of the world it's reported that the Church is one of the faster growing religions around. They have extensive property interests now in many major cities in Europe and in America, of course. Most famous of their members would be the likes of Tom Cruise and John Travolta. It was founded by L. Ron Hubbard and has been the subject of controversy and criticism and a lot of media attention, it has to be said, including a recent Louis Theroux documentary. I suppose much of the criticism directed at the Church's anti-psychiatry views. The Church has also taken a strong line against antidepressants, particularly if they're being taken by or prescribed for young people.
Right. Now, they already have an office, as we say, in Dublin, but they've had a presence here for many years. Why a second office, have they said?
Well, that's a very good question. As you mentioned, Scientology has had a presence here for several decades, and it would probably be fair to say that it hasn't grown in the numbers here the same way as it has in other countries. Now, the new National Affairs Office, which is in a building on Merrion Square, a place actually where L. Ron Hubbard himself spent time in the 1950s, this is designed as a centre for the Church's outreach efforts here in Ireland. Now, some former members I met are not happy, and they say that this opening should prompt debate about whether Scientology should be involved in outreach programmes and what level of support should they be given from, say, state agencies.
You met, I gather, Brian, with one former member who spent, was it 21 years with Scientology?
That's right. I met with John Duignan. He spent 21 years living and working with the Church of Scientology in various parts of the world before he left and came back to settle in Ireland. He would have set up the kind of outreach offices that were opened in Dublin a few weeks ago. This is some of his experience.
I joined the inner core of the operation. In other words, so I, rather than giving money, I gave my life. So I was what's called a Sea Org member. They try and describe it as a monastic level, but really it's the clergy of Scientology. It's the upper level clergy of Scientology, right? And so I was a member of this, which is, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You live communally.
What kept you in it for 21 years?
Well, what Scientology is very good at doing is creating this kind of bubble, this bubble atmosphere of it's almost like an echo chamber where the only voice you listen to is the voice of the great leader, L. Ron Hubbard.
So for those 21 years you were primarily based where?
I was based in a lot of places. Equally in America, I was based in Africa. I was in England. I was in Germany and Copenhagen and Australia. At one point, I was running their transportation system. If you're very, very lucky, you might get for a short while. You might get 50 quid a week if you're really, really lucky.
You see, some people will say, "Well, what's wrong with that? That sounds like a lot of monastic lives that people choose to live."
They can set their own rules. They can set their own control mechanism. But I was going up to the library every day, and I was able to get onto the internet there, and I was able to look up Scientology. I found out about all this alien. I didn't know about that before. I didn't know about the fleet of DC-8s flew down from the Acturius Confederacy down to Earth and dropped all of us, our spirits onto the primitive earth beings. I didn't know that stuff, and I realized this was it's a Flash Gordon story. It's this is science fiction from the 1950s, and I realized I had to get out. I had to get out of there, and so literally I had to set up a ruse where they thought I was coming over to the funeral of my uncle, but actually I absconded to a separate place in Birmingham, and it sounds crazy. That's the reality of it.
So, Brian, some of John Duignan's experiences recalled there of his 21 years as, I think he said, a Sea Org member of the Church of Scientology. Now, I know you got a response from the Church to all this, but first, you did ask John about the opening of the new office in Dublin, did you?
That's right, and as I said, he has some insight into this type of office because he used to be involved in setting them up himself in other countries. So I asked him what he thought the function of this second office would be.
is designed for lobbying. So yeah, this office here is very well financed. The guys staffing it are Sea Org members, and they're all very, very trained, if you like, in lobbying. They're very good at that.
Because there already is a presence in Ireland, but it hasn't really taken off in Ireland, has it?
No, it hasn't. It never has. I mean, look, partly because I think the Irish are a bit more cute than a lot of people. I think, they've not been able to get in on that level of getting people to do and to buy Scientology services. They've not been able to do that, and that's what this thrust is. This thrust is to get in on the charity NGO sort of level, and that's what this office is all about.
Were you concerned, John, when you saw that office opening in Ireland at the weekend?
Well, yeah, in a way. I've seen them do this in the States. They've set up a similar one in Brussels. They've set up a similar one in Washington, D.C. and in Los Angeles, that kind of thing.
And of course, Scientology might say you're just a disenfranchised former member, you're bitter now.
They call me defrocked apostate is the lovely phrase that they use for people like me. Internally, I'm what's called a suppressive person. A degraded being, a suppressive person, all that kind of stuff. That's what I am to them.
And then say for 21 years of your life, you were the very person who would have been heralding the opening of a centre like this.
Of course, absolutely. So I was there in 2004 at this gala event in St Hill in England, and Tom Cruise was up on the stage, and he was, telling us, that we need to work even harder. And then Dave Miscavige, the leader of Scientology, is patting Tom Cruise in the back and giving him this medal and saying, this is the most dedicated, hardest working Scientologist I've ever met in my entire life. Now, he's saying that to people like me. I've been working for 20 years, 24 hours a day. I had never come home to see my family, and I had lived and sweated. There were periods when I hadn't slept for a week in order to get jobs done for them. And I must admit, I thank Tom Cruise because he helped me wake up, because that's what really, really got me looking, that there's something wrong with this. What about people like us? What about us Sea Org guys? We believed it was wonderful.
So, Brian, John Duignan with his criticisms there, you put a number of questions then to the church about the new office and about what people like John have been saying.
That's right. I requested a tour of the office actually, and I asked would a spokesperson be available for interview, but was told that this wasn't possible at the moment. But the church did answer queries via email. Now, on the new office, when I asked them about the remit, they confirmed that they will be rolling out some programmes from it. They say the programmes will reach into society organically and according to such factors as need, interest and availability of resources. And they say many of the programmes here have been operating already for some years in a greater or lesser degree. For example, they say volunteers have distributed 250,000 leaflets in relation to drug addiction, many DVDs as well. So they say these are particularly popular, and there seem to be very few alternatives for effective drug education, and that their booklets are very much in demand.
And then in regard to the criticism from former members?
That's right. They say every religion or organisation has its ex-members. They say they're a small minority of which are sometimes critical for reasons best known to them. They say they're there to help, and the vast majority of people appreciate that.
Right, so what about things like, say, charitable status and the like?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I asked them why they hadn't availed of charitable status here in Ireland. They say they're a non-profit body. They say at the moment their focus is simply to utilise their community programmes to help others, so in the areas of drug addiction, homelessness and so on. They say their doors are always open every day for the general public to come and find out what they do for themselves. And then I asked them about how many people are members of the church in Ireland, and they said it was several hundred at the moment, that it would definitely grow, and that their membership is not required of to avail of their community programmes. Now, I just tweeted a link to all those replies if people want to have a look.
Right, and now the other aspect, as you were saying, Brian, to the church's work that's already begun here, the whole area of drug and alcohol addiction. What did they have to say about that? That's
right, and again there's controversy around the church's views of psychiatry and how this would ensure that any programmes they run in this area would be in line with HSE guidelines, for example. Now, in recent months there's been a group travelling the country called the Drug Free World Campaign, and this group has met met with some councillors and Lord Mayors, and a number of them have posed for pictures with the group, including, for example, the Waterford Metropolitan Mayor John Hearn from Sinn Féin, who says he didn't know that they were funded by Scientology. He said, "It was only after we posed for photographs that they warned me you might get a heap of mail saying we're Scientology." Now, John Hearn pulled away from the campaign because of the association with Scientology and after advice from Sinn Féin. There was one other instance as well, Sean, where a Cork councillor posed for a photograph at their headquarters in the US, and this was Cork councillor and former Deputy Lord Mayor Ken O'Flynn. He's from Fianna Fáil, and he posed with Scientologists at their Clearwater base in Florida. Now, to be fair to Ken O'Flynn, he says he was invited to visit the centre whilst on holidays there by an Irish-American woman he knows, and he said they were extremely respectful, they were very friendly. He toured their buildings. He pointed out to me that he would have toured many religious groups and buildings through his work. He says he doesn't share their anti-psychiatry beliefs, and he didn't give permission for the picture to be posted online. I asked him if he agreed with a recent newspaper headline here that some Irish politicians had acted as stooges for Scientology, and Ken O'Flynn said, "People call politicians all sorts of things. If I was to take notice of that, I would never get my work done as a local rep."
Probably a fair point there. Now, you asked Scientology about the drugs programme. What did they say?
That's right. They said the purpose of the programme and the visits to different cities in Ireland is, of course, to raise awareness of the truth about drugs and how they can destroy lives and communities. They say they have a lot of positive feedback to the campaign, that the materials they hand out don't mention any religion and the purpose really is drug education, and that they do mention that the main sponsor of the materials is the Church of Scientology, and this is routinely the case with dignitaries who would come and give their support.
Brian, thanks indeed for that report. That's